we're going to move on over to TNA and what is going on there. So since we've last spoken, Fightful released the contents of this letter that was sent on behalf of the TNA staff or roster to Anthem Sports and Entertainment, mainly to Leonard Asper, but I've taken some portions of the letter. You can read the entire thing either on Fightful. We also have it up on the Post Wrestling site. But from the letter, we are deeply saddened by the decision to remove Scott D'Amore from the TNA/Impact family. Scott is a brilliant wrestling mind that has guided this company and has it positioned to take the next step upward in our industry. Scott is also much more than this. He's a trusted friend, confidant, teacher, advisor, brother, and mentor to so many within the TNA Impact family. Scott has been the heart of the TNA/Impact family for over 2 decades. To thrive, a wrestling company must have both an eye toward business decisions and its fingers on the pulse of creative decisions and the ever-changing appetite of our fans. It is in light of this concern and our desire to uphold the high standards of TNA/Impact that we offer this letter. It is our desire to have a dialogue with you and with the company in an effort to protect the present and the future of TNA Impact for you, for Anthem, for the fans, and for professional wrestlers. We feel strongly that a wrestling person needs to be intimately involved at a high level to ensure that the amazing company we have all built and a product we have provided to our fans continues to grow and flourish. It is our opinion that the best possible person for that role was, is, and will be Scott. We recognize that we do not necessarily know all the facts or details around the decision to remove Scott. In life, there's always the rumors, the opinions, and somewhere in between, the truth. We rarely get to know which is which. It remains our hope and desire that everyone can set aside the past few days and any hurt feelings or unkind words that may have been exchanged and meet to discuss a path forward that preserves the TNA Impact family that we all hold so dearly. Signed the TNA roster.
Your TNA family was...
Your TNA family, yes. Yeah. So, I mean, that in and of itself, I mean, it pretty much just crystallizes the amount of support that Scott D'Amore has in that locker room. And obviously believing that they want a wrestling person overseeing this company and a belief that a wrestling person is now not overseeing this company. And that's going to be a big disconnect. And I think this is going to be a pretty key time for TNA in that, what are they? Because for the last number of months, I mean, this has been a company that has been, I think, cultivating some momentum. And it's been this idea of here is the underdog company that is trying to fight for more market share. And is Anthem looking for that? Because in acquiring market share, it means spending a lot. And is Anthem really in a mindset of spending more versus we have our budget, we want our programming, and there's a limit to where we're going to be going. And that seems to be where these sides part.
Right. I mean, on some level, aren't those the same thing? You know, if you're Anthem, you're looking to use this product to make money, and to make money, you need to cultivate a portion of the market share. The question is, to what length are they, willing to spend to acquire that? Again, as it states in this letter, I mean, this also confirms that the locker room is none the wiser to the reasons why D'Amore might have been let go than we are. We don't exactly know what sort of dispute might have caused them to decide to let him go before the rebrand, before, Hard to Kill, before like having D'Amore out there basically be your representative, for all those weeks and months, even though you already knew that he was not going to be here.
And bringing everyone up to speed, like we do know the timeline that Scott D'Amore, and I've been told similar here, like the offer to buy TNA came after he learned that he was being terminated. This was not as though he was trying to make a play for TNA and it blew up in his face. It was, he was informed of this. And then after that is when he made the move to buy the company. So what spurred on the decision to terminate Scott D'Amore? Was it just a difference of you want to be going this way, we're going a different way? I mean, somewhere in there, I mean, this relationship fractured.
But it seems to, I mean, if this letter isn't enough of an indication that even the roster was blindsided, it was probably the consistent outpouring of support for Scott D'Amore from all the roster publicly that probably, enough confirms it. It's a very interesting thing that we're even talking about here, because I don't know if we've ever seen a roster, or at least what seems to be a representation of the roster, band together to speak out about a corporate decision. It seems incredibly rare. And confirms, at least to the public, that there is discontent within the company against its own management. And it's a very nicely worded letter. Like, this was like, whoever wrote this did a great job of like softening.
This was not
criticism.
adversarial. It was constantly focusing on Leonard Asper and Anthem for rebuilding this, for putting money, for believing in them. Very cordial. Not one mention, though, of Anthony Ciccione in this. And I mean,
except the implication that this is not a wrestling person that is taking over.
That's the clear message in this. I mean, I don't know if you go so far as to take this as a vote of no confidence, but that's kind of what this is. I mean, I'm sure they are positioning this more. This is a loyalty to Scott rather than an attack on Anthony Ciccione, but you're choosing your side here. And this TNA roster is obviously like they are on one side here.
And we should clarify, we don't know who the people responsible directly for this letter are. It says your TNA family, but that could be a portion of the roster, could be everybody, but we have no indication either way. But it's very fascinating, and I'm very curious to see how Anthem will respond to something like this, if it's even something that they can respond to. Like, again, we don't know the cause, like the actual cause of termination. It could be something that they simply can't walk back on. But if it is something that they could walk back on, would they? They are now dealing with a bit of a PR crisis, I would say, when you have an entire roster, or at least what feels like an entire roster, speak out against a major decision that you've made. And do they care enough to answer it, or will they just kind of proceed and let it wash over, so to speak?
Do you see this as a bigger issue in the TNA locker room or among the TNA fan base?
Maybe both, John. But the thing is, if you're a TNA fan, especially the type of TNA fan that has stuck around to this point, are you going to keep watching TNA? Despite all this, I kind of feel the answer might be yes. Now, again, I think so much of it will depend on the quality of the product itself, right? Don't you think? So we'll wait to see what that is. But if you're a member of the roster, will this affect your decision to stick around the company if you might have other options? Perhaps. It depends what sort of options those might be coming the roster's way.
You're going to be as loyal as your options are. Like, if you are somebody, like, let's just take someone like a Josh Alexander, who has been as associated with this brand as they have had throughout the Anthem regime. Maybe if all things are equal and he has a, relatively similar offer for, like just hypothetically, from an AEW or a WWE, maybe it's like you're staying with TNA. Maybe now, are you more entertaining of that offer? That's for Josh Alexander to decide. That's for all of these performers to decide. I would, like, in part, I do look at this. Number one is that I think Scott D'Amore was likely the most capable of running this company. But we can also,
when you say running this company, you mean creatively? Maybe
from a creative standpoint, from somebody that has years of working with these specific talents. I mean, someone that has relationships across the board with all of these different companies, with wrestlers, and that has, at just decades of booking experience on top of it.
I only ask because there might be a distinction, at least from Anthem's perspective, about financially running a company versus creatively running a company. And I guess we don't really have any indication about, like, how D'Amore did either way. But was this?
I mean, he was elevated to TNA president, so I mean that does encompass a lot more than just talent, personnel, and everything. Like, that's a big job.
But was the decision to part ways with him more motivated by finances, or was it creative? I'm not as willing to think that it had any criticism of, like, his creativity or aptitude as a pro wrestler.
I'm sure that was not the issue. I'm just stating that if you are looking at all things being equal, I mean, that is the person that you would kind of want, like, steering the ship from that creative standpoint as a producer. Now, on the other side is we can look at Impact, and it is definitely a significantly better state than it was a number of years ago when Anthem took over. But they are in a position where is spending more money going to drastically increase their market share? Like, they are in a very tough spot. Yes, if they had been able to land a CM Punk, probably would have help them greatly when it comes to selling tickets. Would they suddenly be going from 100,000 viewers to 1.5 million viewers on Access TV with CM Punk? No, they would not be. And they're not getting CM Punk, and they didn't get Will Ospreay, and they're not getting Kazuchika Okada. So if it is just spending more on running bigger buildings and going after, the next tiers of talent, like we have seen, they did very good numbers in Vegas last month, but is spending more money going to drastically impact them? Like, their numbers have been they draw what they draw on Access. They draw 100,000 viewers. Like, they are not doing what Women of Wrestling is doing. It is like they are in a spot. They have a loyal audience, but it's a small audience. Yeah. Like, this is, I don't know how high the ceiling is for TNA, and if Anthem is just happy with what they're doing now. Do they want to spend more money when the change is going to be minimal of how many, are we going to be a company that's ever selling 5,000 seat arenas out? I think that's a pretty tough, to imagine TNA being able to get to.
From all accounts, it seems like they were headed towards wanting to actually be a competitor in the space, being a relevant program. Is that counter in some ways to Anthem's, goals of simply having a profitable business that is cost effective, that can draw some attention to, some of their other properties? Again, we don't know. This is only speculation on our part, but if you're a talent, if you're a member of the roster, I certainly think you'd want this company to rival eventually, an AEW, and probably not a WWE ever, but at least, gaining a stronger market share as a relevant wrestling promotion in North America or in the world. And maybe this is a letter that is not just to want to bring back Scott D'Amore, but also to indicate that they feel like this, they had a good chance. They were on a good, run of momentum, and this is potentially cutting that off.
Well, next weekend, they're in New Orleans for 2 nights. These will be the first shows since Scott D'Amore's termination. And, I'm certain those will be very interesting shows to hear what comes out of those shows. And, I would think at the very least, you would want to have some kind of town hall address to get all this out there.
Do you think so? But this is the other thing too, John, is it's that this handoff has, it seemed to me, been very poor. The fact that a move like this came so sudden to the roster, and the fact that we've gotten to the point now where the roster is sending a letter to the company voicing their concern, tells me
and the letter being public too.
Yeah. And I know if it was probably passed on internally, but everything leaks at this point, and they know, whatever. But it tells me the transition was poorly handled. And it makes me question whether or not, how much effort they're going to be putting into, something like a town hall that might address a lot of concerns. But we'll see. They definitely should.
Well, after the New Orleans shows, they're back March 8th and 9th in Windsor. And that's very interesting, where you are in Scott D'Amore's backyard. And if ever there's going to be an audience that is going to be, we want Scott, that's the shows for them. I don't know if we will get that anywhere else, but Windsor would be the shows that you would. But again, that's also almost.
These are also pre-tapes, aren't they?
Sacrifice is a live pay-per-view.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
TNA Plus special on the 8th of next month. Will this still be a big story for at least the TNA audience by next month? We will see. Now, on the creative front, it had been reported in the Observer that Tommy Dreamer would be heading up the creative team. Tommy Dreamer has clarified this. So Tommy Dreamer is explaining that he is not heading up creative. It is a collaborative effort with R.D. Evans, Robert Evans, and with Hunter Johnson, Delirious. Now, Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful has added that Gail Kim and George Barbosa will be in supporting roles with creative, so having some connection there, and that it's essentially going to be overseen by Ariel Schneer, who will be underneath Anthony Ciccione. And we definitely need graphs for all of these different tiers of the TNA structure. But that appears to be what the picture is.
Seems pretty simple to me, John, and maybe that's only because I know these people. Like, this is a very bizarre news day in a story for me to, like, consume, because we worked with these people. Like Barbosa, we've spoken about many times. He's a very good friend of both of ours. Worked on Survival of the Hitman with us, so like just to kind of see some of these names like as a part of this was a bit of a trip. But
why don't you explain George Barbosa's role in the company as well, for those that don't know who he is?
well, I mean, we worked together with him like 6 years ago, so I don't really know what his role in the company is today. But obviously, we know him, and I know him personally as an excellent video producer, video editor. I suppose in recent years, he's probably most known for the Diary specials that have profiled several TNA acts, and beyond that, I
Pretty
mean,
much any of their digital originals, like
Mhm.
that is like George Barbosa leading that front.
Yeah, and maybe like when with some of these concerns about like non-wrestling people, perhaps working within the company, George is very much a wrestling person and somebody who I think really understands how to get personality out of talents via his video production, and like he's a tremendous interviewer too. So I think, I mean, I'm biased because I've worked together with him for so long, but I think he's a great pickup for a position like this, or whatever position they have for him in creative. So yeah, but I don't even know exactly what he'll be in charge of within the company.
Maybe the first project can be Diary, the New Orleans tapings behind the scenes.
There's certainly quite a story to tell, I'm sure. But yeah, we also worked with Ariel Schnur. He's also very much a wrestling person, somebody who like kind of really knows the ins and outs, I would say, of both MMA and pro wrestling. Again, have not worked with these people in like 6 years, so I don't really kind of know their capacities to this day. But
also was Dr. Ariel on Impact Programming.
People will recognize him as Dr. Ariel. Mm-hmm.